Hello and welcome to something a little bit different today. As you can see, we're actually out on location. Now what I'm going to do is run through all of my settings. So I'm going to show you how I set up, how I compose, how I focus, how I kind of get my shot, so to speak. So it's almost sunset. I'm probably a bit later than I wanted to be. But anyway, let me get set up and then we'll have a chat. Okay, so ISO set to 100. Just going to manually focus around about halfway into the frame. As long as we're shooting between f8 and f14 thereabouts, everything will be nice and sharp. But most important thing for this is our shutter speed. Okay, so we want our shutter speed at half a second. Half a second is going to give us some nice movement and texture. So that's the key to this image, is our shutter speed. And then we're just going to change our aperture to slightly overexposed, because first we're going to capture our foreground. So just by having it at f9, it's just going to slightly overexpose everything, so we get plenty of detail in our foreground. And now we're just going to wait for some waves to roll in. So once the waves roll in, we're going to capture them as they crash over the rocks. So here comes a wave now. We'll just time it, so then we get our 2-second timer, and then click as it rolls over the wave. That gives us our first shot. Okay, and just repeat the process. Repeat the process a few times. And try and capture more than what you need, so then you can pick out your favourite images. So once we've got our foreground sorted, we're then going to capture our sky, and all we're going to do is speed up our shutter speed, and that's it. Okay, we don't need to worry about the highlights too much at this stage. Okay, we're shooting into the sun, so you're going to blow your highlights. That's a natural thing. Okay, so here's our images in Lightroom. And I've gone through and I've just given a couple of them a 5-star rating, just so I can sort of show you the difference in the textures that we can get. Okay, so all of these are exact same composition, and all we've done is just played around with the water flow. Okay, so we've got a couple here. That's where the water's flowing out. That's where the water's flowing in. This one's a little bit of combination of both. We've got water flowing out down on the bottom right and some water flowing in. And then this one again with the water flowing out. Okay, so as you can see, it creates some really nice textures in your foreground, especially when you've got some flow in the water. Okay, so all at that half a second exposure. Okay, and like they create completely different images. Okay, so you might want to have all the texture of the rocks with the sunshine, or you might want to have that water flow over the rocks. Okay, so same composition but two completely different images. Okay, and really fun way to shoot. Okay, it's a fun way to get down to a local beach, find some rocks, and just take photos of the water crashing over the rocks. Create some really nice texture. Okay, and by keeping it that half a second shutter speed, you're creating movement and texture at the same time. Now what we're going to do is just a very quick basic edit on these images. Okay, so this was my favorite one, so I'm going to show you just a starting point. Okay, just to try and get some of this detail in the sky back, bring it up to where it's looking a little bit nicer. Okay, raw files are always going to be flat. So the first thing I want to do is go up to my profile. I'm going to change my profile to Adobe Landscape. It's going to boost the colors a little bit, bring back a little bit of the shadow and highlight detail. Okay, so from here, the first thing I do with every image is I go to my lens correction, remove chromatic aberration, and apply my profile. Profile will change with every lens and camera combination. So I know with my lens it has a little bit of barrel distortion. So by enabling the profile, it just makes our horizon nice and straight. Okay, so I do that with pretty much every image with this lens camera combination. Okay, so from here what we want to do is just darken down that sky a little bit. So I'm going to go up to my masking tools. I'm going to select a linear gradient. I only need to bring down the exposure by about half a stop, but I'm going to bring my highlights down a fair bit. I'm going to bring the highlights down by about 60, and then I'm just going to click and drag, and as you can see, that's just now darkening the sky. Okay, a smooth gradient is better. Okay, so if we can get a nice smooth gradient, you don't want your gradient like right on the horizon, because then it just starts to look a little bit fake. Okay, so a nice big smooth gradient, and you get a nice transition between the sky and the foreground. Okay, so if we look at our before and after already, okay, it's come a long way just with a couple of very basic adjustments. Okay, that's all I'm going to do at this stage. Okay, so that gives me a better idea of what I'm dealing with. So from here, all we need to do is press Control A on the keyboard. That will select all, and then if we just hit sync, check all and synchronize. Now that's going to apply that exact same setting that we've done to all of our images. Okay, so now we've just quickly edited all of those images. Okay, and then it's just a matter of you find the one that you like, and then you go and you start to edit. Okay, so again, not a full workflow, just giving you some ideas of where to start with your editing. Okay, and I haven't even touched anything really. All I've really done is apply the Adobe Landscape and darken the sky. Okay, so for social media, that's fine. That's all you really need to do. Like if we have a look at our original image, I'll just reset that one. Okay, we had a few areas in the sky that we've blown out. If I didn't have that clipping warning on, and I just showed you that image, you wouldn't know. Okay, you wouldn't know that that sky was blown out. You might realize that the sun is going to be blown out. But as far as social media goes, no one's going to notice. Which brings me to part 2. Okay, so part 2, what we're going to do is we're going to blend these two together. So first thing I like to do is just get them to a point where they're very similar exposure wise. Okay, so I'm just going to apply my landscape preset, which is kind of what we did before. Okay, just bring down our shadows and highlights a little bit. Now this one, I still think it's a bit too bright, so I'm just going to bring the exposure down a bit. I might just bring back those whites a little. Okay, and then I'm going to hold Control on my keyboard and select my darker exposure, and then just sync them. So then that way everything's very similar. Okay, we've got the same adjustments, and the only thing we're going to do is just brighten this one up a little bit. So it's a little bit too dark. So all I'm going to do is lift my exposure and get them looking similar. Okay, so that's pretty good there. Alright, now again I'm going to select one, hold Control on the keyboard and select the other image, and then if I right click, we're going to go to Edit In, and we're going to open them as layers in Photoshop. So if we open as layers in Photoshop, okay, so now Photoshop has opened them as two separate layers. So as we can see down on the right hand side, we have two layers. Okay, so Photoshop has put the brighter exposure on top, which is good. That's the way I wanted to do it. Let's just say the brighter one was underneath when we had our darker exposure. You can just click and drag. Okay, so for this to work, we do want our brighter exposure on top. Okay, you can do it the other way, but for the purpose of this video, brighter exposure on top. And then what we're going to do is we're going to create a layer mask. So bottom right hand corner, create a layer mask. We're just going to grab our gradient tool, which is just over here. Just make sure our gradient tool is on black and white. So by default it should be on black and white. It may be selected as a gradient in this little drop down box. We have two options. We have gradient and classic. I think by default it was on gradient. Okay, and then select our layer mask, and all we're going to do is click and drag. And as you can see, what it's doing, it's blacking out that top layer to reveal what's underneath. Okay, so now we've gone from that to that. Okay, so it's blended our two exposures together. Okay, so that's how easy it is to blend two exposures together. Lightroom can't do it at this stage. Lightroom only works on one image. You can do a HDR merge, but I've got another video planned for HDR versus exposure blending. Okay, so from there we're just going to go up to Layer, Flatten Image. Okay, and then if we just hit Save, what it's going to do, it's going to save that image. Now we can close down Photoshop. We don't need Photoshop anymore. It's going to save that blended exposure into Lightroom for us. So there's our original photo. Okay, and there's our blended one. So now we've got that photo where we've got all that detail back in our sky. Okay, and as a final little step, so a bonus tip, just to tidy up this area where we've got the blown out sky, what we're going to do is go up to our masking. we're going to select a radial gradient. Okay, and we're just going to draw a little oval over that sun. Okay, so somewhere around about there. Might just make it a little bit bigger just to really get some of that glow. And then all I'm going to do is just warm it up a little bit. Okay, don't go too far. Okay, so just warm it up a little bit. And the real magic is here in the effects. If we go to the effects, and we're just going to bring our clarity down, what that does is add a bit of a glow. Okay, so it's going to hide a little bit of that blown out sky by adding a bit of a glow to it. And that's pretty much it. Okay, and that's pretty much it. That's a starting point. Okay, so that's how to shoot and edit a very basic seascape. Okay, capturing movement in the water. Okay, again, not a full workflow. You know, there's all sorts of things we can do, and this is where the personal preference comes into it. Okay, you might want a very contrasty image. You might want to add some clarity, vibrance. Okay, knock yourself out. That's where you can have fun with the sliders. There's going to be lots more videos coming up where I give you ideas of how to use these sliders and different things we can do with them. But that's where the personal preference comes in. I'm not going to tell you how to edit your images, just going to give you some ideas of what you can do to your images. Okay, so that's it for this video. Hopefully you liked it. If you did, please leave a like. Feel free to subscribe. There will be more videos coming up. And thank you for watching.